Hi, folks. Welcome to this launch session for the collection of reflections on the Automation Fellowship that we called Unboxing the Black Box. I'm Patrick Krogan. I'm Associate Professor of Digital Cultures at UWE Bristol. I was also an Automation Fellow. I was working on how automation and AI are changing our ideas and our practices of creative making today. I just want to introduce my fellow panel members, and then I'll do a short introduction talk and then hand over to them. With me today is Mike Phillips, who you might remember from the last session if you were tuned in on the main stage. He's Professor of Interdisciplinary Arts at the University of Plymouth and Director of Research at idat.org. He was the network's co-investigator for the automation theme. Also with me this morning, or actually this afternoon now, is Polly Mcpherson. Polly Mcpherson is Associate Professor of Design at the University of Plymouth and Associate Head of School for Enterprise there. She was an Automation Fellow as well and working on the craft production processes. And these are both fellow contributors to the collection with me. So I'm going to do a short introductory talk and then I'll hand over to the folks. So I'm going to share some slides now. So let me know if you can't see those. Okay, great. Now the Unboxing the Black Box collection is now available from the Southwest Creative Technology Network's automation pages on its website. Actually, I'll post the link in a moment in the chat as well so that you can just go directly to it if you want. This collection has 5 contributions from 5 fellows and also from Mike as the co-investigator for the automation theme on behalf of the network. And my own contribution also brings in the voices of 3 other fellows who I interviewed as part of my research project. So first, just let me say thanks very much to the contributors and to the network for getting this publication together, and especially Alice Quigley behind the scenes for all of her work in putting this publication together. I think it is a small but perfectly formed set of reflections on automation and creativity. Okay, so just let me make a few general comments. I was thinking about this week, and perhaps in some ways our fellowship came together 1 year early, because this year we have seen extraordinary challenges and possibilities of the emergence of AI and automation in contemporary society in our kind of COVID period. For instance, we've seen apps for automating tracking and tracing procedures that have worked really, really well in some countries, not so well in some other places. We also had, particularly here in various countries in the UK, a rather stunning controversy around algorithms for calculating school leaving grades. And this kind of showed the population at large what some smaller constituencies in our populations have already become used to. And that is that automatic decision making that's based on old data can be rife with inaccuracy, bias, and injustice. I suppose most of all we've seen over this last 9-10 months that while we often live our lives on a kind of automatic pilot, events can and will overtake us, and they'll force us to try and take the controls again if we can. Of course, many people have not been able to do that. They have lost jobs, their health, sometimes even their friends and their loved ones. And while automation and AI will be important and even crucial in how we collectively adjust now and going into the future, we will need to do a lot of the thinking and doing ourselves, together and individually. So I would say that this then is the kind of updated, wider context of the reflections that are gathered together in Unboxing the Black Box. It is dedicated to thinking about creativity and creative production in the age of AI and automation. And it does so with an eye on the wider transformations of society and culture that AI and automation are a big part of. Rob Dooley and Polly Mcpherson's contributions look at object design and fabrication in the context of changes to industrial and craft production processes. Birgit Aga, another fellow, looks at the chatbot design and development processes at the moment and argues that society collectively needs to intervene in the commercial domains in which AIs are being designed to become our friends and our guides. Fellow Rachel Smith looks at automated image making and explores methods to work with and against image and facial recognition systems. And Mike Phillips reflects on his practice as a way of responding to the world in which we routinely open up our hearts to the automated systems of global corporations. So that's my brief presentation on the what joys and pleasures are in the Unboxing the Black Box collection. And I'll just go and post the link to it so that you can go and have a play with it into the chat window here. If you go there, you'll find it. Scroll down the page a little bit. So now let me just hand over to Polly Mcpherson, who wants to do a little bit of a talk and a reflection on her work as part of the fellowship and how it then translated into her contribution. So I'll hand over to you, Polly. Polly, you need to unmute.
Okay, start again. Okay, hopefully that's working. So my name is Polly Mcpherson, and I am an academic fellow for the Automation Project for Southwest Creative Technologies. And before I start anything else, just a quick thank you, particularly to Patrick for bringing this publication together. He's been fantastic helping me thinking about how I do in practice to put it into words. That's a big thank you to him. A little bit of background: I trained in ceramics, in clay. And I've worked with the numerous materials, including casting, iron, plastics, etc. My other background or working is that I teach undergraduate and postgraduate in the area of designing and making objects and artifacts. So wood, metal, plastic, ceramics, one-offs to small batch production, using a mixture of hand and digital processes. Earlier, I really like the comment that Mike talked about earlier in the session around the thinkings of automation and how it's sort of, for some, it's seen as it's been done to us. And I think there is a sort of problem in some sort of areas of friction in regards to this, and how that is related to design and maker practice. And I think some of the things that Rupert was talking about earlier echoes this. So as an automation fellow, I've been exploring the developments and how areas of this aspect of automation has affected craft practitioners in the Southwest and design and maker practices. And I've been doing this in three ways. The first way has been looking actually into what's been happening in the lost, past, current automation, including networks, capabilities, machineries and specialism, things like that. Also using automation tools to develop new sense and sense-making objects and artifacts. And then, of course, one of the other things is using these findings to develop new knowledge and collaborations, which is one of the great things about this fellowship that has been really helpful for me to have conversations with other creatives about this process. So what I want to just kind of talk about is that section around using automation as a tool to develop new sense and sense-making objects and artifacts. What I've been thinking about is Professor Daniel Miller, who's a professor of anthropology in UCL, and he writes in his book Materials, Culture and Mass Production that objects consistently assert their presence as material forces and symbols. They act in a way, they frame the way we act in the world as well as the way we think in the world. And I've been kind of thinking about this in regards to this fellowship and using this and my ideas of collaboration to really develop my practice and my thinking, etc. With Daniel, Professor Miller's thinking, my background, I've also been thinking about the co-creation. To say collaboration is key in my practice. Design, collaboration, disruption, and then of course fixing and thinking about new ways of working. So what I've been doing is, and I'm just going to show you some really basic kind of beginnings of the project, and more has been developed since then, using a very basic 3D ceramic, 3D printing process, taking a simple shape and then beginning to develop it using a 3D ceramic printer, and then thinking about how I can disrupt this. So hopefully this film will come together. So on the left-hand side, you can see a basic 3D computer program. I've used that basic spiral and then transferred it into the ceramic printer. And at different points, I've disrupted it. I've stopped it, I've changed it, I've added to it in other areas. And this is where this kind of idea of disruption, interrupting, and maybe in other areas actually pushing things forward and adding other materials. Finally, so this is the this is the outcome. So what I've used is a porcelain, which is a high thought of material, ceramic material, a very high vitreous material, and also used a gold luster to add to kind of show experience of aspects of where things have changed or things have maybe seen as mistakes, but also seen areas of celebration and joyfulness. What I'm going to just quickly show you, I'm showing that, and I'm going to show you the actual piece. So hopefully you can actually see, this is the object artifact that I've mentioned. It's very delicate. It has some joyful structures flopping down here. And as I said, there's kind of knitting even of a piece and playing around with and experimenting with different ways of working and disrupting these pieces. I'm going to stop now. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Polly. That's great. I'm going to do a little talk. So just share my screen. Present that. Hopefully you can see this. So the, have we got that on there? Yeah. Yes. Okay, so I enjoy working with people, sort of. Actually, this wasn't a human that said this. This was an AI. This was Hal from 2001 Space Oddity, and I'll mention him at the end as well. So really, my just to follow on from what how this started when the automation project kicked off. It was this issue which I raised in the earlier section, and is in the part of this this paper about how problematic automation is for the creative industries. And part of the issue, I think, is as Patrick pointed out, we really don't quite understand yet our relationships to these entities. And in particular, the mutant algorithms that plague us now, whether that's within our education system or within a lack of understanding of the difference between a spreadsheet and a database. This is a quote from Ballard, who isn't mentioned in the paper actually, but I think it just highlights this linguistic problem we have of communication with these entities. You know, whether it's this inability to communicate with them, or indeed understand the implications of the kind of communications that we might have with them. You know, we can't remain mute or you can if you turn off your microphone, I guess, but you can't remain mute in this dialogue that we're having with an inevitable future. So the fact that Python is more popular than French as a second language in our education system, and that very language is being used to then do some peculiar things within the internet, and then kids becoming arrested. And of course, it's ironic that their futures should be corrupt by an algorithm now, quite recently. However, the point I'm talking about here is relates back to Turing's paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence paper from 1950, where he talks about obviously the Turing test, but the idea of imitation and the imitation game. And this is here, I think, possibly the fact that the imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And we've seen this a few years ago here in 2016 with Microsoft releasing Tay into the Twitter sphere and it imitating us and rapidly becoming a kind of racist asshole here from The Verge. And the idea that these things are imitating us is critical to our understanding of them, and I think consequently our understanding of ourselves. And the problem we have here is how do we then distinguish between ourselves and obviously we may need the Voigt-Kampff machine to allow us to detect that difference, because it is increasingly becoming harder as these things start to live out our dreams for us. And historically, we've wanted these things. We've had this desire for these other things, these other entities, to have a kind of dialogue, whether it's Talos from ancient Greek or Faust and his homunculi, or indeed the summoning of the golem. Or indeed the visions that we create for ourselves, which try and mimic what these things might be, whether, 2001, Ex Machina, the Avengers, or AI, super toys all summer long. We don't quite understand our relationship to them. And indeed, when they do start communicating with us, as indeed they did here in the 2010 flash crash, which wiped billions off the stock exchange, when these artificial entities went haywire and just decided to trade without any kind of human intervention. We actually don't understand what these things are. We feel uncomfortable with them. It's not just about the uncanny valley. It's actually our inability to comprehend the speed and the agility with which these things move. In fact, I shared this image of the flash crash with Wolfram Images to see if we could identify it. And it did. It identified that graph as a device. Now, AI as a device, I think, is quite interesting. If you look at our relationship with devices, and in the paper I mentioned Vygotsky's and activity theory, the idea that the tools we use change the world, and in us changing the world, we change ourselves. Quite straightforward here, again from 2001, we have the ape using the bone, following its relationship with the black column, and that spark, that inspiration of changing the world with this device or this bone. We can understand that. We can understand the physicality of these things, but these systems-based approaches are much harder to grasp. Even, maximizing our incompetence with attempts to do this, designers working with these processes, with these smart processes, it's hugely problematic. It's fraught with issues. I mean, design thinking, and what did designers do before they started thinking? It can be seen here magically in Waitroses, just in Cornwall, down from where I live here, where they have a smart tap, which was designed to save water. But as you can see here, it was a complete failure. And this is a little label that was stuck across this tap in the gents' toilets, which says, please do not attempt to turn off this tap. It runs for 45 seconds from its last use and will turn off automatically. Attempts to turn off this tap will cause it to run for a further 45 seconds. This is a design feature and not a fault. Now, imagine the complexity of something as simple as a tap in the context of a larger set of relationships with artificial systems that we just cannot comprehend. So I've been working with AI and automated systems for quite a while and trying to develop a kind of creative practice around that. And what I think I've become to realize is that one has to acknowledge the other, the significant other in this relationship is not just the material that you're using, but is actually a conversation with these systems. And in the paper, I talk about the autonomous wheelchair, which we worked on with for Donald Rodney, and also the Slothbot, which used some of those kind of robotic systems there, a very slow-moving wall that moves around the University of Plymouth in the ArcOS system. But I thought I'd talk about this old piece, which in uncovering these things from 2000, actually the year 2000, which was an Arts Council grant that we got with the Wellcome and Gulbenkian Foundation, one of those art science projects, those late sort of 90s art science projects. The search for terrestrial intelligence was interesting because it gave us, or attempted to give us, an image of the world that, and again, this is in pre-Google Earth days. We were working with the National Remote Sensing Centre in Leicester to get some early satellite images. And it was a response to SETI, which was the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and really asked the questions, would we recognize intelligence if we saw it? And so why not point these technologies back onto planet Earth in order that we might then know how intelligent we were in recognizing our own intelligence? Of course, we failed miserably, but it was inspired by the use of these autonomous systems to see the world around us, particularly in deep space. This is the image on the right there, is the face on Mars, which was recovered by the Viking missions in '76, and then again recovered in around '98. And what you can see here is actually a modified version of that. The critical thing was, it was a blur. The first image was taken was a blur, and then it was processed using AI and other kind of machine learning to recover from that blur, as we do nowadays with lots of filters in Photoshop and things like that. But this was an intelligent system. And the problem was, it revealed a face that actually isn't there. And the idea was that actually maybe these things are just realizing our dreams because we trained them. And the system here allows you to select what a sign of intelligence that you think is a sign of intelligence on this planet. This is actually Plymouth. You can see that's actually where IDAT is. And then for the little autonomous system to go off and find multiple versions of these things and allowing you to name them. And the idea was that this goes beyond the kind of, the irony of looking for intelligence on Earth, but looking at, truth. Would we know the truth when they see it, these AI systems? It engaged with critical issues around the shift from the hegemony of the eye, I can never say that word, to the reliance on autonomous systems that actually do the seeing for us, that know the world for us without any kind of sensory intervention by humans. And as a result, do we recognize ourselves through these artificial eyes? So it's a little scary, I think, but a great new set of relationships that we're trying to build here. The idea, I think, is that as we now move into an era of systems that know our desires better than we do, we are providing them with role models. We still don't understand them as much as they don't understand us. We don't understand ourselves. And the creepy thing about this is that in this recursive relationship is that they are modeling themselves on our behavior. I mean, having that dialogue with them, maybe there's something, some hope in that if they are learning from us and about us, and then we're giving them agency to act upon on our behalf. Maybe the future is safe. Maybe we can trust them, because after all, we've been such good governors of the world in which they've been newly born. And one hopes that learning from our good behavior, that future will be secure. So I talk about that in the paper, and I hope you'll enjoy reading it, and some of the links that go from that as well. I'll stop sharing that. So back to you, Patrick.
Thanks very much, Mike. I've been posting kind of spam comments in the stage chat. So, has anybody got any questions about that? Oh, thanks, Birgit. Great talk. What can we learn from our technological past to design a technology-mediated future? And will there be any room for the poetics and playfulness? Oh, thanks for that simple question, Birgit. A nice small one. Anybody want to have a go at that?
Well, I think it's all poetics. I mean, code itself is poetry. It's a language, I think, that we are hopefully teaching children to speak better with these things. And one can be very critical, I think, of the humanities and the way that these systems have been used to date. They are not actually treating them as entities which one can have a conversation with, and slightly ignoring them. So the more we start dealing with departments of modern languages engaging with this kind of poetry, which has been for quite a long time now, the better, I think. I think you're on mute, Patrick. Oops. Can't hear you.
I think you're still on mute, Patrick. Shall I say a little bit then about the poetic aspect of it?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So of course, as somebody who is very much material based, and I see the materials very poetic, and in how we're, I in fact, even for this presentation, I wanted to bring some clay and do a bit of this. And I think one of the elements of how can we learn, I think we need to be learning to not be afraid and to embrace, but also be a little bit cautious. That's my kind of attitude to this. Cautious, and I think part of the kind of, even we go back to the aspects of when I was talking about the Industrial Revolution, and they're kind of, we've been to put it in here. It's about embracing and making sure that we feel happy to play in a new process, and thinking about progression, really. Yeah,
that beautifully said, Polly. That's what I was going to say about your work. It seems to me that it's a kind of example of practice of doing that, where and what's key to that is you have to kind of get in the middle of the system, among its processes, by a kind of disruptive practice, for instance. And in doing so, you're doing that learning, because the technology is not, this comes from a kind of philosophy underpinning my paper. A technology is not a definite thing. It's always to be invented as to what its possibilities are and what it can be. And by the same token, we kind of only know, we can only learn technologically or technically, because everything that we have that gives us something to learn comes through artifacts that have come down to us from some previous time, whether it's books or statues or pottery or coffee cups or anything, really. That's how we know how we are in the world and so on. So I guess we just have to get deeper into that in order to find that poetics and playfulness.
And find the balance that works well for individuals. So for some people, being in the more virtual world will work better for them. For others, it is about how we perform around objects, artifacts, how they how we can bring those to kind of marry well together, so that, as Bea was suggesting, there is poetics or poetry in there and playfulness as well, and kind of breaking down those barriers.
Yeah. Great. I think we've done our 30 minutes. So thanks very much, folks. Appreciate your attention. And thanks to Mike and Polly for coming in today from locations in Plymouth, I imagine. And yeah, I look forward to meeting up with you folks again soon, and with the other automation fellows, just following on from the last panel, expressing some desire for us all to get back together and play and be poetic again with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll hand back now to Rosanna, and thanks again for your attention, and go and check out the collection. I think it's kind of good. I would be biased though, wouldn't I? Bye-bye.